Probably a lot of the cities that we had, they just have to go property.
Yeah, they don't lose that dollar.
Like Berkeley Lake, I mean, they've got a little bit of commercial and on PIB, but almost everything in Berkeley Lake is residential.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's like
And all those are for you.
Were we?
Oh, no, I didn't hand out copies.
But the media's got theirs.
Yes.
Marie, here's a copy of
I bet you
presentation.
said you already filled it with my hand.
Did we put these over there in case somebody else comes in?
We would need the door.
What?
We would need the door. I was really supposed to put a sign on that door, but I forgot.
Well,
No, I was just saying we need the table.
yeah, I just carried it out.
Because nobody's gonna know where to.
I'll put it right here. Somebody comes by.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Pray and do the pledge as usual. Y'all pray with me. Lord, thank you for allowing us to get here today. We're grateful for the weather you sent us. We're grateful for the sunshine. We ask that you watch over us, protect us, watch over our meeting, watch over our community. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We need a motion to approve the agenda. First, I'd like to say that Tommy is out tonight with his son at a track meet, so he wanted to be here, but he is supporting his family.
It's their youngest son, and he just can't miss any of the last 40. They're all QB brother.
So we need approval of the agenda. As I said, it is a special call meeting, so we can't amend it.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second? All those in favor? Let's move into our public hearing. Thomas, will you open us up in the public hearing?
I will. Did you want me to summarize what the bill does? Okay. The last legislative term back in 2024, a bill was passed. It's been commonly referred to as House Bill 581. There were three parts of it. One part dealt with the rule or the role that tax assessors, the county appraisers and their functions. A second part that I'll talk about a little bit is allowed for a floating local option sales tax. The primary part that we're about here tonight is a floating homestead exemption. And what it does for those jurisdictions that do not opt out, it provides that for those properties in a jurisdiction that are homestead exempted, that the increase in the assessed value of those properties is capped at 3% per year. Well, no, I'm sorry. It is capped at the rate of inflation, which this year happened to be 3% based on the consumer price index. So if the consumer price index were 4%, or like it was a couple years ago, 7%, that would be the cap. For the difference in the actual assessed value based on the market and the inflationary rate, that delta would be an additional homestead exemption for those properties. It doesn't apply to those residential properties that do not have homestead exemptions on them. It does not apply to commercial properties, and I use that term broadly to include office, retail, institutional, and industrial. The other part that I skipped over is the floating local option sales tax. That is a provision for an additional local option sales tax for jurisdictions. There are some limitations, a number of limitations on using that particular sales tax. One is that all of the jurisdictions, not counting the school boards, within a county have to not opt out of the floating homestead exemption, assuming that the county and all of its municipalities have not opted out or have opted in to the floating homestead exemption, then those jurisdictions can have their local delegation present local legislation to allow the floating local option sales tax, and then there is a referendum to approve it. It would last for 5 years and then would have to be reapproved or renewed through the same process. That, in a brief nutshell, is what that law did.
Question, it says all properties must be assessed every 3 years.
Yeah.
Can they be assessed in a shorter period of time?
If it sells,
Just if it's.
if it sells, yeah. Rhonda, go to page 2, please. Yeah, I know, I've gotta figure out how we can make things bigger when it comes to numbers, but everybody has this paper. Here's the bottom line, look at this, where it says value homestead exemptions. You can look at each city. Next column is number of exempt properties. We have 84 exempt properties. You can see the other cities. Homestead is $20 million. Homestead at 40% is $8 million. Our millage rate of 0.616. The exempt tax value amount is $50,000. The property tax reduction of the 3.4% differential equates to $1,700 change of what it would cost the city from last year. If you look above, you can look from left to right to see each city's cost. And this is part of Phil Sutton's information that he gave us. So you go down to the bottom, our projected tax digest is 65 million. You go back to 2011, the tax digest was $30 million. So in that time frame, it is doubled. And if that would happen on these exempt properties, each time that growth would have happened, it would have been capped at whatever the CPI was for your tax increase amount. Does that make sense? The next page, so page 3. This one shows what the CPI was in each of these years from 2024 to 2011, and where it says the CPI, you make that 3.15, 3.07 down that column. And then that's where, over those 13 years, the CPI grew by 39%, or 3% annually. So that's where they're using this 3.4 amount that was on that previous page. So it's a formula that shows the gross digest, inflation, and then the inflationary with the digest, and the real net growth of the properties. So that's the 2 pages, that's an addition to what we saw when we had the joint municipality and county meeting last month or whatever it was. Everything else through this, go ahead and flip through, just kind of slowly there, Rhonda, please. You know, everybody can read what's stated from there, but the bottom line is, if somebody opts out of our municipalities, which is fine if they do, but it's really not, because as long as all of us stay in, not counting the school board, and the county doesn't have to stay in, we then have a right to ask each of their cities' voters to see if they want to do what's called a floss sales tax. It would be another 1%. But what would happen is, whatever we collect, if it's approved, it's good for, is it 5 or 6 years, Thomas? 5 years, but then it sunsets, and then you have to re-vote on it, just like SPLOST does. And the money that is collected, I've got a chart further back in here, we'll get to it. You roll back the next year's millage. If we collected $300,000, we would roll back the millage and give credit for that $300,000. You could get to where there's no property tax because the floss is collecting that money and the city has rolled it back. can't go negative, it would have to be held. And your biggest liability to that is, let's say over those 5 years, we roll it all the way back from 6.16 to 1.6. And then the floss doesn't get renewed, guess what? We gotta raise it back up, all that amount we rolled it back, because floss didn't get approved. We have to go back to that revenue source. That is the worst case scenario. Does that make sense? No, yes. You're the only one out there.
Well, for one thing, your millage rate isn't 6.16, it's 7.
No.
Well,
Anyway, let me pertain to this though. We can talk about millage later, but it's 6.16.
the reason why I say that is my 2024 property tax bill shows a tax rate of 7.16.
That's not what we approved.
That is correct. 6.16 was last year's.
Yeah.
7 is the new one.
6.16 was 2023 and 2022.
Okay. Anyway, pertaining to
That's
this,
These reports were running on last.
24. All right, but pertaining to this, do you understand what I'm saying? What would happen with the millage rate?
Right.
You understand? If we roll back to whatever was collected, if it doesn't get approved, the city council would have to vote to fund the city. And you could have a 6 point something millage increase to get back to that amount.
I understand.
Okay?
So, I do have a question.
All right?
I've got several questions. Hey,
So the way you're describing it, it almost sounds like it's gonna stack on top of each other year to year. Would it not just come off what we approved, the millage rate every year, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So,
Each year, then whatever's collected from the tax,
right,
so you have to collect the money first.
sure,
So you'll be running a year behind.
okay,
And so whatever, like I said, if $200,000 is collected,
right,
we
right,
then roll that back when we're setting that budget the next year.
okay.
And then the next year, whatever we collect, we roll that back. But it cannot go negative.
Sure. I'm just curious, if we kept the millage rate the same, and whatever that would have been, minus what we collect on taxes year to year, how would it go down or keep going down?
Each year,
Or just keep continuing going down?
correct. And that's why your first year, you don't roll it back because you hadn't collected the money yet.
Right.
Or we go ahead and ask your other questions.
oh, I got several. Cause I've been reading, I printed out and I read the HB 581 along with the frequently asked questions, the summary, the whole 9 yards. And it may be that Thomas has to answer some of this.
And that's why we have him here, from the
Right.
legal side of it.
Yeah. So from the way I understand, the floss is completely separate from the floating homestead exemption.
There's two different items.
That's correct.
It's completely 2 different items.
The only way they're related is because if you
It's all
don't,
up underneath the House Bill 581.
and if you've got a jurisdiction inside a county that opts out, you're ineligible, all the jurisdictions are ineligible for the floating local option sales tax. That's the only way they're related.
Well, my question also is by looking, and it was an article back. I don't have it, but I was reading where Habersham County has opted into it.
Correct.
And then everybody's been looking at whether or not to opt in or opt out. Most of the cities, it looks like, seems to be opting out.
Well, in our advertising, for
Well,
us to have these meetings, we had to advertise it
Right,
which is confusing. In Habersham County, we had a joint meeting with all the municipalities.
Right.
To kind of come up consensus that the voters voted for this. So this was the voters' will, and that we will educate ourselves, educate everybody, and move along with it. Because it was the voters' will.
so my understanding is on, every single time you see something in the newspaper that somebody has basically put the notice in, is kind of like CYA. It's almost.
It is, and we heard word that the city of Baldwin, they just voted it in and didn't run any advertisements to opt out, have any meetings, which we didn't.
I didn't realize that was an option,
Yeah.
but tonight, if y'all wanted to vote to opt in, y'all can do that. And Thomas, please confirm that, and that way we would cancel the 2 meetings for next week.
That's correct. The advertisements are, it's like the ads for alcohol and things like that. It's, the language is required by statute, so that's why they read the way they do.
Yeah, I was reading, where was it? There was someone, one of the other cities down south that says if a number of cities and counties decide to opt out, the General Assembly can come back and pass a local act for a referendum that could put the homestead exemption on our taxes, whether or not we want it or not.
Correct.
Is that what you're also seeing too?
I've heard from 2 independent sources that that is a point of discussion down at the State House.
And from what I understand, the main reason why is because of all this increase that we have had. Because I was looking at mine and
Increase in assessments.
yeah, the increase in the assessments, the, in 2024, it went, well, from 2023, 2024, it went from about 179,000 to 208. So it's a huge decrease. And I was looking at, when I first came, when we were looking at the millage rate, I looked at what was being posted on Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, RedFinHome.com, just to see the appraised values. And I wrote those down. And between October and now, each one of them are showing my property at just about a 10,000 decrease. So the question to me was, in the middle of all this, is when you have this property tax and you're talking about the homestead exemption, and you're basically looking back at 2024, and my property, based on assessment, decreases, where's the benefit of the inflation, the 3%? Just because of.
The assessment goes down, there's not going to be any, there's not going to, I mean, the purpose of this exemption is to cap the increase. So if there's a decrease, there's not going to be any benefit.
There's not. And I think that's what a lot of people may not understand, is because from some of the things I've been watching in regard to some real estate, we could see some prices start falling. So it's all, and unless the state wants to do something differently, I'm just waiting for the price to fall.
Yeah.
And pay less taxes based upon the prices falling.
Jerry, as a realtor, how much value do you put in Zillow in those?
Absolutely none. So those are run on computer algorithms, and they pull those data together, and they run a ton of different things put into there. And when somebody calls me and lists in their house or something like that, they say, "Oh, my assessment's this," I pay that no attention.
Well, I don't either, but at the same time, it does give you a baseline that you can look and do some comparisons for. I used to do real estate.
I think that you do make a good point about the values going down and capturing that, but it still leads us to the point where the voters voted for it, and as a whole, we're speaking for the
Whole
the
state,
voters.
really.
Yeah.
And that was my other question, is if y'all decide to opt out of it, you've got over 65% of the state of Georgians that have decided to opt in. It's kind of like y'all are, if anyone that opts out of it is doing it intuitive to the people that voted for it.
I think that we do, that we need to vote it in, because that's the way the voters want it. And I think that we need to follow in that direction, regardless of my belief of this or the council's belief. I think that the voters told us what they wanted, and they want it. But it is a very good point about value spending.
Yeah, and the thing is like Tom said, it's really not gonna if the rates do go down, because I'm gonna start attending the Habersham County to be able to put my 2 cents into them, is when these tax assessors come out to wind up looking at everything, I don't want just to sit on my haunches when it comes tax time and go, well, I didn't argue for it.
The county has a more generous exemption than House Bill 581.
And I know that that was the one thing that's really frustrating, is a lot of the exemptions that I have applied for and gotten wasn't because the city or the county told me about it. It was someone on the street or a friend of mine mentioned it, and I think that's disgusting. That you've got a lot of people here in Demorest that that living on fixed budget, retirees. I mean, my whole neighborhood, and Jimmy knows that, is that whole neighborhood, we've lived there almost 10 years, never had a trick-or-treater because there's no kids. No kids. So when you're looking at people in that type of situation, it would have been helpful on some of the benefits that maybe they could have, but a lot of them that I've talked to going, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that till a couple of years ago myself. I had it, but unfortunately, my father drove me up to the assessor's office to apply for a homestead exemption and signed up for everything there.
Well, that's the only
Other
thing
than
I've
that,
ever known.
I have no clue about that, so I've educated myself on that, and I think anybody that's eligible for that exemption with the county, or any exemptions, I mean, we have an age-based exemption here, it's not much, but anybody eligible for exemption needs to apply for it.
But a lot of people aren't aware of it. I've got the homestead and the school. And then Alan's also a veteran, so I've got exemptions through that, but the school was something somebody told me about. And I've got a friend that's 78 years old and he's going, what?
Yeah, I mean, most people don't even think about it until they get their tax bill or government bodies just determine what the millage rate is. At that point, it's already too late, because usually I think it's April 1st.
April 1st.
April 1st is what the deadline to apply for those exemptions are. So anybody that's unsure whether they have all the exemptions they're eligible for, you either need to contact the county assessor's office and ask them, or if they're, is it 65? But the,
City,
what?
the city?
Yeah, for the city.
65 and older.
So 65 and older, so anybody 65 and older can get an exemption for the city. So if you qualify for that, you need to sign up now before April 1st.
Y'all put it on the back of the tax bill, but it might be nice to have, hey, you need to check with the county too. The one thing also, Thomas, is that I saw several times where it said estimated rollback rate.
Mhm.
What in the world is that? Because when I read it, I even read it to my husband, he said, I don't know, because what it says, the estimated rollback rate means the current year's estimated millage rate minus the millage equivalent of the total net assessed value added by assessments. A, as calculated and certified to the tax commissioner by the levying authority for county and education tax purposes, and as calculated and certified to the collecting officer of the municipality by the levying authority for municipal tax purposes. What in the devil does that mean when you're talking about this bill?
What I understand that to mean, and frankly, I'd have to ask one of the tax commissioners folks how they're interpreting that. It either means that the rollback that is calculated later in the year has to be front-loaded and calculated earlier, and that estimate put on the tax bills, or in specific reference to 581, it means that there's a determination as to what that exemption is going to be, and that is shown on the tax bills. I think it's the former, but to be honest with you, I don't know.
Yeah, because when it was talking about the floating homestead exemption, then further down, it was talking about some other, and I had gone on to the municipality website to try to figure out some of this. I was reading it and I thought, I had worked on one when I was in Gainesville, different house bills for some of the attorneys I worked with, and even when I was in Atlanta. And I thought, some of this, if you're not knowledgeable in regard to how to find this stuff, some of this is gobbledygook.
Think about the way it was listed on the ballot, how confusing that was.
Oh, I went and I researched on that.
But most people didn't.
No, they
And
don't.
so just to read it, you're like, I don't know, but it sounds good for a taxpayer, you know, so let's vote yes.
I had my siblings and my children talk to me about it.
Yeah, that estimated,
A bunch of lawyers.
actually, well, I don't know. I don't think the person who proposed this was an attorney. I think that estimated rollback, I think that is what you generally see is the rollback that you hear discussed if you come to the millage rate meetings later in the year. I think that what this does is require the jurisdictions to estimate what that ought to be, and put it on the tax bills.
How does it benefit the taxpayer?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think my personal opinion is I don't think it does. It provides another piece of information, but I don't think that most folks are gonna have any basis to analyze what that may mean to them. And the final decision is not made till the jurisdiction set the millage rate later in the year anyway.
And April 1st.
April 1st is when the deadline is for in the tax bills, or the assessments go out soon after April 1. The millage rate's not actually set till the digest is confirmed, sometime in the fall.
Our exemption deadline is March 1. I'm not sure about the county.
It's March 1. March 1, so anybody that may be hearing this or seeing this, spread the word to anybody that might not know that's age 65 to make sure and lives within the city limits of Demorest, contact City Hall to apply for that age exemption.
Well, I notified them. My neighbors already.
All right, council, if y'all like to discuss calling this for a vote and move forward with it, or wait till our next week's meeting.
Is the vote on the agenda?
Yes, there's a vote on the agenda.
Yeah, because I thought the question you asked was whether y'all could vote on it at the noon meeting and then cancel the 6 o'clock meeting next week.
Well, I did ask that one in the email, but I asked you just then, could we do it tonight?
Yeah, since it's not on the agenda that way, I don't think you can. I don't think you can vote on, I don't think you can pass a resolution tonight. I'm sorry.
So that means we can vote on it at noon next Thursday, and then cancel 6 o'clock.
It sounds like a plan to me, you put a vote on the meeting agenda, and then we can vote. Just, as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
I like that.
So I have one last question. So if the city opts into the House Bill 581 and we go for the floss also, and then the next referendum comes up and it gets denied. So what you're telling me is if floss the second time gets, people don't vote for it,
We
then
can come
we're
back
going
again.
back into increasing millage rates.
Correct.
But from the way I understand is if the city opts in, we get the floss, that's passed, 1% additional tax. That money is to be applied over for
Rollback.
the property taxes. It's not gonna be for anything else. It's pure property
Only
tax.
for the millage rate.
And it benefits all the residents.
And it benefits the taxpayers. You don't
Right.
own property, it's not gonna
That's
benefit
true. That's
you, but
true.
you're gonna pay that extra 1 cent.
and so will everybody that comes through and spends money in this county.
And the next question and last question is on the floss. How is that going to be distributed back over to Demorest? Because I know when I also used to be an accountant, so I used to also have to do sales tax forms for all the businesses that I was an accountant over. And it got split up to all the different counties. So how is it? Is it Habersham? Does the money go to Habersham and then it gets doled
Same
out?
thing as SPOS. If we get roughly, as a round number, $32,000 a month from SPOS, and that's a 1 penny tax, I would guesstimate we would be somewhere in that same amount, because there's still gonna be a formula that would do that. So if we had 32,000,
That would still have to be negotiated.
it is negotiable. I'm just giving you a round number. What we get now is $384,000. Again, our projected tax digest is 475,000. So if we take 475 minus 384, that would leave $91,000 for taxes to pay that same amount. That's how much it would be rolled back. And then the next year, I don't know what happens to the money, Thomas, if we're collecting that and we go negative, because we can't go negative on a millage rate. It can go down to 0.0. But if we're not, we only have to do the next year, we only have to make up $91,000.
I remember something about it going to the county. They can't go negative, then it goes to the county.
But that's what I'm asking, is we don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, generally speaking, the allocation will have to be done by an intergovernmental agreement like LOST. And then, yeah, I do think that Jerry's right. There was some provision that if there was excess to one of the cities, then it goes to the county to retire
They
debt.
go negative. That's where, can we look at, can you research that part, please?
I don't think we gotta worry about going negative in county stuff. Put in some big mega retail chains,
Try to be positive.
yeah. Here in Demorest, it doesn't affect us a lot. Does a little bit, not a lot. In the county, it does affect us greatly. So that's where we're going to see the market. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll close this public hearing.
If I can make a couple points here, we did approve the PTSD, well, y'all did 15,000, so all that was sent in today. And I included Casey and Dave, so they would know that and let their, first responders know that. The county had their, county commission had their retreat today. Dave and I went at 1 o'clock session, had a very good discussion with, Van Dickerson, who is a consultant. I'm hoping they'll be voting on that at their next meeting to approve that. Andrew has done a good job with the band for July 4th, and he has selected the Troubadour Project, and they are a 70s genre music. If you look up Troubadour Project, you can get there's probably 60 or 70 songs they list on there from that era. So, and then we're working on some additional singers that day, and we would set them up, because we have the stage, and then they get there around 1 to start setting up on the stage. We would have the additional entertainment down at the pavilion on the steps where they could set up right there. It wouldn't affect the band setting up, and they would play from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock, because that's the time that the band needs to do their sound checks, and then play from 7:15 to 9:15.
Peggy talked to 11 different companies today.
Yeah. Oh, good. What kind of response?
Well, that's sponsors. Yes, sponsors.
What kind of response did she get? Just in
We'll
general.
take it to corporate, yeah, we're interested.
No, that's awesome.
Same thing, I was looking at one yesterday as well.
They see we mail out the letters to our vendors that do business in the city. And they'll be getting those out here shortly too. We'll go over that at our next meeting.
I have sorry about that, have one other question. In regard to this, floating exemption, as we were talking about, you have to go to the city, to the county to get the exemptions. Are the taxpayers here in Demorest gonna have to come to the city and say, hey, I want this exemption, or is it an automatic?
It's automatic, because we had the number, as I read out, we know how many are in each city. So it's something the tax assessors know already. Now, if you want to be new to sign up for any exemptions, you then do have to come for that. Again, there's only 84 out of, I want to say 1,200 properties in the city, and it doesn't count for investment property, commercial, anything, industry, anything like that. It's only your primary residence.
So there's no applications at all? It's gonna be
There's two different things, I think, just to be straight. There is an application for the homestead exemption.
Right.
But there's not an application for this, because it's already captured, that information's already known,
Okay, yeah.
because you have the exemption already.
Well, that's the reason why I was asking, because I know I had to come and had to fill something out. Same
But you
thing
do
with the
not have to
county.
fill this out for this is,
Auto, okay.
yes, ma'am.
Any questions?
Ask them all.
All right, with nothing else, we'll close this public hearing, and we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, sir. A second? All those in favor?
You do not want your, I will take it back.